Hello guys, welcome back to yet another video. Now today we are going to do a bit of a comparison, not really, but we are going to discuss how the Dragon Ball Super English dub is better than the Dragon Ball Z English dub that Funimation did throughout 1999 to 2003, and even before that with the Ocean cast, but you know, the in-house dub that was from 1999 to 2003, and I am not alone as I am joined by Kyokai in 1994. Now, if you want to look at great side stories, great sort of, not necessarily theory videos, but discussions regarding, you know, like, what if this character got more of the spotlight?
No, thank you for having me on the channel. You've been on mine a couple times, and we've had a lot of fun on some of those side stories with Vegeta and Tarble coming out soon. I know that you and me have a lot of similar opinions, and I know that you have just as much passion on the topic that we're about to talk about that I do, because I honestly, at this point, am getting sick of week-to-week arguments about this. So, I mean, I'm kind of happy to finally come here and put my thoughts out on a recording of how I feel about these changes. So thank you for having me on the channel.
No, all good, man. Like, it's one thing to, like, make a Twitter video about it, but it's also like another just to get it all out with someone, you know, especially with, you know, someone else in a video, just recorded thoughts. You know, it's much better and much healthier in my opinion than like just going on a Twitter rant for like ages about, you know, a topic. So yeah, the topic anyway is Dragon Ball Z. Like, there's a stigma that the Dragon Ball Super English dub is worse than the Dragon Ball Z English dub, and that's just simply not true. Like, the Dragon Ball Super dub, yes, it has dub changes that people may not agree with, like time to make the donuts and all of that kind of stuff, Super Saiyan please, and we've discussed and criticized the Dragon Ball Super English dub, you know, in the past. Like, we openly criticize it. We don't hate it, obviously, because we still watch it, you know, pretty much every week, but it's like, we do criticize it, but it's not anywhere close to the level of shitness as the Dragon Ball Z English dub is, because the Dragon Ball Z English dub, that, you know, Barry Watson and all of the old producers at Funimation, they openly try to Americanize the show, purposely trying to, you know, change the scripts and all of that. And as we'll talk about later, Chris Sabat is doing that to a certain extent, because, you know, people that watch the Japanese version of Super every week, you know, his intent is to openly change it as well, but not Americanize it. He still wants to make a faithful script, but just to, you know, make some of the more meta jokes, you know, more prevalent and stuff. So he's just trying to make it a bit different. But to say that the Dragon Ball Super English dub is, you know, basically worse than the Z-dub, that's just ludicrous in my opinion. But yeah, Brandon, what are your thoughts, man?
I mean, ludicrous is one of the most perfect words I think I could use, because I'm not going to talk as I was somebody that was on the internet when the original Z-dub came out, because I'm not. There are several people in this community, Danny, Kendamu, there are plenty of people that were actually, you know, around and active in a kind of Dragon Ball Online community at the time. I was not. I was a child. I was enjoying, you know, Dragon Ball Z on TV. I had some exposure to it when I was a little kid and I lived in Japan, but I didn't know the language, so none of it stuck. It was just a show I saw clips of, you know what I mean? Some cool fights. But I grew up on these dubs is what I grew up on, so originally watching them, I don't understand their changes. You know, I don't get that. I don't get that for years until I watch it in Japanese and actually read the subtitles and understand that there are these massive, massive changes in both, you know, the Funimation quote-unquote Ocean dub and then the in-house Funimation dub. And there's so many dub changes that, like, it's just ludicrous to think that these small little meta jokes or colloquialisms that they're trying to throw in could be anywhere close to as bad, quote-unquote, of a job of dubbing a anime as what Z is, because, like, they had so little material to work with. They didn't just have scripts like they do now. They didn't have phone numbers or like, just producers they could call up, like, you know, in like 10 minutes or try to get something.
They didn't know.
Well, I mean,
yeah.
they did, but we're still talking about the early 90s in technology. We're talking landline phones. We're talking fax machines. We're talking like slow AOL email. Like, we're talking like, there's nowhere close to the amount of connection that they have now. Like, it is far surpassed what it was. And yes, they had, like what you said, some access to it, but they weren't utilizing their access either as they are now. Their jokes, their colloquial changes are all on purpose and to try to pay as much homage to their Toei counterpart, but also still try to make something fresh. And that's something that Chris Sabat's gone on the record and said is he knows that all of us in America, I won't say all of us, that's a pretty, big generalization, but a good number of people in America watch Dragon Ball Super in Japanese. They may have never watched Z in Japanese, but they did use Crunchyroll, and other, third-party providers to watch this syndicated show coming from Japan, so they had to read it over the past few years, and that is something that they know as a company. You just got done watching Dragon Ball Super. What can we do to keep your attention locked week to week on Toonami? Oh, we can make small little changes that don't completely change, the actual show like what we had in the old days and what we're going to bring up in a couple examples in a minute. But we don't have the changes that physically affect the show because it's such a bad dubbing change. It's just little, jokes. And that's where I think that these up in arms fans are having this problem with the show for no reason. I mean, we're literally making a fuss over 2 or 3 words that don't impact anything more than a weirdness for a person's character.
Yeah, absolutely. Time to make the donut. Like, there are cases to be made, in terms of criticizing these things. Like, it's totally understandable if you criticize, Home for Infinite Losers that Dr. Mascherito says in episode 69, even though I totally defend that line. I already made a video on this, but I want to just reiterate it again, since this is more of a podcast-style video, and, I think more eyeballs will be, tuned into this video. But anyway, the Home for Infinite Losers, that was obviously a line in the Ocean dub to, HFIL to basically not have any religious intent or to basically just censor the show. And they had to do that. To basically put it on the air because of the religious content. And in the Dragon Ball Super episode 69 English dub, Dr. Mascherito, he says, I escaped the Home for Infinite Losers, in the English dub, instead of in the Japanese, he goes something like, oh, I escaped, the depths of hell, or whatever he says. So Home for Infinite Losers, it is very characteristic of Dr. Mascherito, and you probably, some of you might not know because he's a Dr. Slump character, but in Dr. Slump, Dr. Mascherito, he's very stuck up, he's very snide, he's a piece of shit, basically. He's just a very stuck up person. So
he's the best scientist on Earth.
Yeah, so it's very characteristic of, him to say, oh, I escaped the Home for Infinite Losers because he's the best villain, he knows best, he's the best human, so of course he would degrade, hell that way and say it's a Home for Infinite Losers. So it's very characteristic of him to say that. So I don't get where the criticism is coming from. I mean, if it works with the character, then it should be in the show, and if it's relatively accurate, which it is. So yeah, just because there's dub changes doesn't make it a bad English dub. And some dub changes are pretty bad. I don't like Super Saiyan Please. I think that is a shitty fucking line. That is a terrible line. Because I don't understand. It's not even a joke, but it's not something to get up in arms about. I mean, I get up in arms about it for, just as a joke, to just basically exaggerate my hatred of that line. It's just, a funny thing that I do on the channel. But it's it's not a huge deal.
You're not getting into wars about it, though. That's the thing. You're not trying to split the community over that change. It's just something you brought up in a video, you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I absolutely. And as we'll go on now, what are some dub changes that you've noticed and you've pointed out that just basically suck in the Ocean and also the Funimation in-house dub compared to the Dragon Ball Super English dub, which isn't that bad, to be honest. So yeah, if you can list some examples, that would be awesome.
Yeah, I got you. So I was talking earlier that dub changes shouldn't really be a problem if they don't really do anything to the context of the show. So with HFIL, the other argument you can have is that, Super is the English dub for us in America. And technically, if you want to be canon, quote unquote, whatever, how terrible that argument already is. If you want to be canon to the English anime, that's what HFIL is where they go. You know what I mean? That's where Gaz and Mez are. So if you're gonna be accurate, why are you not gonna reference that in Dragon Ball Super like it didn't happen in Dragon Ball Z? Like, I mean, that's just ludicrous. As an English speaking person watching the show, if I had never seen the Japanese version, I would have no problem having that connection with HFIL and HFIL and those two series. It links the shows. But I mean, we're talking about changes like in the Z dub whenever Goku's fighting Vegeta. We're talking about him going to Ozaru and Goku saying, oh yeah, Vegeta's the one who stomped on all those innocent people at the World Martial Arts tournaments and stepped on my grandpa. Like, no, like that's a terrible rationalization, and the only reason you're having that rationalization is because it's a dub change. Like, that censorship of trying to have death and all of that taken out of the show literally just changed a complete idea that somebody had, a complete memory that somebody had over that. He's supposed to have the realization that he stepped on his grandpa, but now he's putting all of that blame on Vegeta. That's just like an unnecessary thing, and that's something way more to be up in arms about. Completely way more to be up in arms about. And if something like the Hope of the Universe speech happened now, oh, I couldn't even imagine the, like, you know, just the fire back from the community on, like, how could you just add a whole paragraph of text that doesn't even relate to the character's motive. It doesn't relate to the character's active mind during the situation. It's terrible. Like, if that would have been done in Super, that would have probably shattered the community, or at least for, you know, these dub changing people.
Understandably so.
It's just crazy. I mean, it's legitimately crazy that, like, we have people saying, oh yeah, you know, the Donuts line is completely worse than Hope of the Universe speech relatively. Like, that's technically what they're saying, because they're saying, oh yes, the Super dub's way worse than Z. It's not. I'm not saying that it doesn't have its faults. It does have faults, but it's like you can't just look at all of these examples. We have, you know, the example from Gohan when he turned Super Saiyan 2, like, 16, you loved life. Like, you don't even know 16, bro. Like, you don't even know him. Like, you have no connection with him except that you've seen him for the past, like, 15 minutes of this fight. Like, that, like, you don't know anything about him. Like, that's just ridiculous. And it's a complete character and context change. Like, and this is way worse than, you know, something you could do in Super, and there's even instances that are better in Super, like the interaction between Vegeta and Kaba, and it's the same lines, but the intention and delivery is different, and it makes a bigger impact on the show, and you're telling me that right there, a change, you know, of Kaba and Vegeta is gonna be something that's bad for the show, and that's worse than 16 you loved life. I mean, it's just crazy to me, and it's irrational to me. That's what it really is.
Yeah, why are people why aren't people, like, attacking Battle of Gods, the movie, how Goku legit says, you know, I would not let you destroy my world. It's like, that's far worse, like, and that's far character breaking, you know, much more so than, you know, anything that Super has done. Also, like, Super has done a lot, like, for those that dislike, you know, a lot of the meta jokes in Dragon Ball Super, and, you know, I don't like a few as well, but it's like what they have done, you know, well, far outseeds the bad, in my opinion. Like, especially with, like, Brian Drummond as Copy Vegeta.
That's such a good reference.
Yeah, and it's clever too. Like, I think it would have been broken if it was like, if he said, oh, it's over 9,000. I think that would have ruined it. But the fact that they were subtle about it and just kept on trucking, but instead of, you know, Chris Sabat doing the voice, it's Brian Drummond doing Copy Vegeta. That's such a good reference, and they don't spoil it by just making it so obnoxious by him saying, oh, it's over 9,000, you know, blah, 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 the next dimension. You know, they don't ruin it that way. So there's a lot of stuff that Super does right, and I've been doing dub changes, you know, about Super for a long time now, you know, for the past like almost a year. So it's like, yeah, it's a little ridiculous when I hear someone say, oh, it's far worse than the Z dub, because it's like the changes in each episode, and I've been covering each episode of the Dragon Ball Super English dub. The dub changes are minor. I watched the episode 4 or 5 times and look at the specific instances of the Japanese and English dub, and I go side by side, frame by frame, dissecting, like each line and all of that stuff, and it's not that different. There are some major dub lines, but for the most part, it's really not that bad at all. And yes, there are some context changes, and there are some little dub change, but dub changes here and there, but it's nothing to affect the overall narrative whatsoever. I'll give you an example, actually. Barry Khan, he says, I'll basically get revenge for Gohan embarrassing me. I'll get revenge. And then he's like, how dare you cross, like, a famous actor? That's in the Japanese, very basic line. But in the English dub, he's like, how dare you cross an actor with, 5 golden Emmys and, like, 2.5 followers on social media? Something to that extent.
Makes it relevant to an American's idea of an actor.
They just spice the line up. Yeah, and I'm not a huge fan of that line, to be honest. Like, I must say, I'm not a huge fan of that line. It's unnecessary, but it's a minor thing, It's not that bad. So I think the overall take-home message here is it's not that bad, and I think people are just trying to get into Twitter wars and all that stuff on purpose, and just trying to, get attention by saying, oh, the Dragon Ball Super dub is, way worse than the Z dub. It's a little ridiculous, and it's hyperbolic. It is hyperbolic. So yeah, what are your final thoughts in the matter, man, before we get out of here?
I mean, I kind of really hope that people aren't just posting it to get, like, attention, because, like, it just, at the end of the day, like, there are a lot of respected people that I have seen say this, and they still do have my respect, but it knocks it down just a little bit, man. Like, hearing you say stuff like that really is a bad impression on not just, like, me, but other people. And, like, think about the people that are casual fans, man, not about the hardcore people that watched it in, Japanese. What are these people thinking? They're just having their, favorite show just be, crapped on, and, like, we're talking about these dub changes, and this is kind of the last one. We're talking about massive dub changes that, change character, context, all of that. We're talking about Bardock being called a brilliant scientist, and you're telling me anything in Dragon Ball Super is beating that change of character, and I'm going to tell you just to, like, stop. I don't know, like, just to stop your sentence, because, like, it's just so bad. I've brought up like 4, 5, or 6 examples of small. I mean, there's thousands of changes. I'm just bringing up a couple off the top of my head with, like, a small little amount of, like, looking at stuff. Like, I mean, if I, like, dissected and went in, we could find some major problems. And you're telling me that Super's doing that worse now. And I don't agree with that. So I do appreciate you giving me the time to come on the channel and, show my stuff off a little bit and talk about why I feel that this is really irrelevant and why we need to get back to everybody just loving the show, because we keep dividing the community for no reason.
Yeah, no, I absolutely, man. And yeah, thank you for coming on, man. And it's also like, if you don't like the Dragon Ball Super dub, that's fine. Like, if there are some episodes where
watch it on Crunchyroll, watch it in Japanese.
Yeah, like the great thing about the franchise now is that there's for like 10 years now, there's been like fucking ways to watch it in Japanese and English. Like, we shouldn't be so divided because we always have the Japanese to go back to. So even if you don't like the Dragon Ball Super English dub, there's always the Japanese to go back to. And that's, I don't like the Dragon Ball Z English dub. Like, I like some of the moments, but for the most part, it's kind of a shitty dub in my opinion. And we've gone over that, several times now. But, I always have the Japanese to go back to. And especially with these Japanese remasters, like, man, that look like incredible, bro, it's gonna look good. So like, yeah, like, I always have the Japanese to go back to. So that's gonna do it for me. That's, basically it. Please make sure to rate, comment, and subscribe, and please go check out Kyokai 1994. Links are in the description. Go check him out. We also did a Tarble and Vegeta side story, you know, a year apart from one another, but that's either here nor there. So yeah, please go check those out in the description. And yeah, so sub to Kyokai, and yeah, see you guys next time.